Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. I am your host, Kelly Meehan, a citizen of the universe and a passage keeper and mentor for our new Earth children. I believe we are entering into a new psychic structure of our reality, and it is meant to embody deeper trust and ways into solid self-love and fearless integrity. Our new world energy of spirit babies needs us to consciously create within conception, trust pregnancy, and have freedom to birth and parent from innate wisdom. This is Spirit Baby Radio. Welcome to episode 239, April 2026, Wild Mothering, Accessing Yourself as a Ritual for Your Highest Feminine Creativity. What is wild mothering? How do you identify your own female energy system? How do you connect with your own ovarian and uterine energies? What does it mean to move from 2D patterns into a multidimensional design? Are you open to heal your deeper creative wounds? Special guest episode. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you, Kelly. Those sound like great
So
questions. I'm like,
excited.
oh,
I
let's
know.
figure that out.
As always, everybody knows how if you see the YouTube version, you will see I have the original, I'll call it the vintage classic collection
Yep,
of Tammy's book.
here's
There
the
you go. The newer
updated.
one, Wild Mothering. She has three
Yep,
amazing books, which honestly, you have to get all three. I'm
here's the
I'm
other one.
sorry. Like, yeah, you have to get all if you have the
Yep.
visual, the Wild Feminine I have, and I think I lent it to someone as I was telling her, I
Yeah.
cannot find it. And that is just literally the book for every, I feel like maybe men too, but I feel like every female should have that book, especially. So how we met and connected. So I don't know. I think I sent you. So Tammy, like I've known your work for years, and honestly, like it was in a time of my own darkness, which maybe you hear. Like I came from becoming mother and had a very traumatic experience with me and my son. And then I wanted to bring what I called birth healing to others, and I still didn't know what that looked like. And so this book, I don't even remember the moment, but I was like, oh, this is the book. And I have to speak for this book right now. It's very, to me, so poetic, so beautiful. Like you can really feel the energy of the words and the stories and the way it supports you. And why now did I ask Tammy to be on here? And I think this is interesting. You had on Instagram something pop up about, I want to say it was, I could be saying it wrong, it was like ancestral archetypal with your son.
Yeah, lineage
And
healing.
then
Yeah.
something hit me energetically. I even said just got chills saying it. So I was like, whoa. I'm like, this is how I get inspired to invite guests here. And I was like, I've always wanted you to come, but I was waiting for that right energy. And I was like, that's it. I wonder if she'll come on because I know you're very like there's a lot happening. But then I was like, that's so profound to me to work on that level with yeah, with your son. And I have so much more to say about that. We'll see if there's space for it because I had an experience of watching ancestral things happen to my like I was like, is this really happening? And nobody else saw it. But I think it's because I can see just notice things, we'll say, that others may not notice. And it actually it unfolded in the way that I was like, I knew it. Do you know what I mean? Like you're just
Oh,
like, oh
yeah,
my gosh, totally blown away.
absolutely.
So I wanted to read your sweet little bio here. Tammy Lynn Kent is the founder of Holistic Pelvic Care for Women and author of Wild Feminine, Finding Power, Spirit, and Joy in the Feminine Body, Wild Mothering, and Wild Creative. She's an international teacher and TEDx speaker. Her books have been published in Mandarin, French, Turkish, and Dutch. She's also a mother of three beautiful sons. Tammy is passionate about empowering women in health and teaching them how to cultivate their creative energy in all stages of life through her practitioner training programs and personal sessions. And I'll have you at the end share how we can find you and all the good things. But there's so many things I want to jump into, but maybe we can begin is why pelvic health? Like what was the call? We'll start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like many young people, I kind of meandered, or maybe I had the joy to meander back before the internet. I was very drawn to the body and interested in the body. My mom is a dance teacher and a dancer, and I was curious about it. I also was interested in birth, and I really just wanted to be a mother too, which was in some ways kind of unusual post-feminist movement, you know. And so I was called to these things kind of innately. And then started my was in college and was at UC Berkeley and studying science, and I was pushed very hard because I was good at science being interested in health to become a doctor because why wouldn't you do the highest achievement, you know? And I went on rounds and tried a few things from various people who were trying to mentor me, and I felt sick entering the hospital, and I didn't know at the time why because I hadn't been raised with holistic medicine. So I had a kind of a disconnect from that. But when I went in, I was very sensitive, and I could feel, I think, how out of balance things were in the hospital setting. And I say that with love and compassion for all the doctors doing good work out there, but it was just for me as a sensitive being wasn't going to be the right fit. So, long story short, through science and being guided towards many things, I kept finding myself drawn to physical therapy because it was the closest I could see to something that was related to the body, hands-on to the body. When I would put my hands on people's bodies, like even in my training, I could feel and sense things that I didn't really have words for. And I was always curious about birth and midwifery, but I didn't want to be a midwife. So when I found out there was a women's health specialty of PT, which I did not find out until I was in the third year of my graduate training, in the last little bit, we had a women's health PT come and speak to us. She was phenomenal, MJ Strawhall. And I thought, there's a women's health specialty. What? Why do I not know this? And why I didn't know this is because we really don't take good care of women's bodies. So I jumped into that and soon found that while I loved the women's health physical therapy and the hands-on tools, the internal massage, and the things that I felt were very helpful for our bodies, I felt like it was misapplied mostly later in life with urine leakage and things like that. And I felt like there could be far more powerful ways and holistic ways of doing this work that really, it was a long story, but I had a baby who's 26 now, left that
Mm.
hospital setting and started working in a more of like a home-based kind of, place where a lot of healers were working out of an old house that had a sweet energy to it, and started developing really my own body of work based on my intuitive skills, based on deep listening with women's bodies, basically writing a book because I couldn't find in the literature anything that explained the power that I was witnessing and sensing in the female body that we all seemed disconnected from. So I kind of built it piece by piece, letter by letter, and I love the written word. I love stories. I love the rhythm of stories. And you were talking about poetry. Poetry is one of my first loves. I love the rhythm of words. So I just started kind of stitching together what felt more aligned with the beauty that I was feeling in women's bodies
Mm.
so that I could find my way back and other women could too.
I really, this is like your what do you call it? Your origin story.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And I'm sure there's so much more to that story, but I was very curious because I do feel like you do something very unique, to be honest. And maybe there's more. You're training people now globally, which is amazing, is the energetic piece. It's like that piece. And when you're talking about that, I remember this story years before this work. I was working in early intervention and in attachment parenting, which is so interesting because I never knew this would come from that kind of.
Right.
And I remember this physical therapist, really great woman, like really just kind, and she would really get in there and just grab the infant and manipulate them. And they were like, Kelly, every time you come here, the babies don't cry. And I said, well, everything I was doing was very energetic, but it wasn't really acceptable, to be honest, in these certain environments. And
Right.
I said, well, and I was trying to bring in the birth psychology piece. I said, well, you're kind of just going in there because I know that's what you're supposed to do, be physical, right? But I
Mm.
says, why not just sit with your energy and maybe sing to the baby? And the woman later came back and said, you know what? I never thought of singing. And she
Right.
said it really added to
Mm.
giving that space because, and then they started calling me an occupational therapist. They're like, the baby. And I said, well, you're going in. I got to fix this torticollis and you're going in and the
Yeah.
baby's screaming.
Yes.
And me, I was just kind of like, I'm showing up. I don't have an agenda. I was very
Mm.
mindful of that
Mm.
energy. And I feel like that's a lot of what you're bringing because in the pelvic floor, okay, we all got lots of stuff. And to me, you coined the term pelvic bowl. Like
Mm.
I've never heard that term, and I literally I
Right.
quote you all the time for like a decade. I'm like, like
Mm.
the pelvic bowl, like Tammy McGann's work,
Right.
because it's like it is a bowl. Let's talk about
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And also maybe I don't know the stats, and maybe you do. What I've learned through the years, I was told through data, I don't know where we're at now, but that feminine beings with wombs tend to have like higher rates of issues than like a male, like where it would be like cancers or cysts or fibroids. I mean, that's a big question. It's like, is that true? Would you say there's more female reproductive issues over male in your own studies?
Well, two things before we get to that. What I'll say is, I was really trained in the medical model, which again, I love physical therapy. I love women's health physical therapy. It is still, though, the medical model, which means you come kind of outside the body, you know best, you work on the body, you fix the body. And it was really only as I became a mother and realized how much I didn't know about my own body, about birth, about a baby, and also tuned into birth psychology and things and started more intuitive listening and listening to the, attended towards more cranial sacral type work, which is more of a listening practice. And as I started to listen, what I felt was the power in the body, the energetic in the body that we weren't quite accessing, partially just because we hadn't been taught it. So I think it kind of tended a little bit more to a holistic medicine, like Chinese medicine or something, where you
Mm.
actually are seeing the body as a source of wisdom. You are
Mhm.
reading the body, and then you're working with those patterns. So I kind of came from, the West and maybe moved towards the East, but in my own way of just wanting to figure out why there was so much power in front of me and beauty, but it was seemed separate from what I was doing as a healthcare person, and it seemed separate from the person that I was working with, and it was separate from myself. So it was like this, I want to stitch this back together, a more holistic way of embodying and also a holistic way of speaking about the body. And so one of the things that I started, besides the way I practiced and became more of a listener than a fixer, is I started using different language. And I had been given, I think most of us, very anatomical language that separated me from the body. And so that's why I did start using language like pelvic bowl, root, wild feminine, ovarian wisdom, ovarian fire. And thank you for naming that, because I think one of the things I notice is part of feminine is you are either a source, feminine repair, you are either a source or you acknowledge source. And so it matters when you say something like that I had the language that was the original, because now it is more ubiquitous. And though sometimes I'm having the experience of people taking things and kind of not realizing, part of understanding a whole system is there is a sacrifice given for an elder that has done things the first or has been the trail builder. And so part of giving chi back to them because they've used their life force to build that trail is just to honor what they've given. So thank you for doing that and demonstrating that, because especially with the internet, people are like, birth energy, blah, blah, blah. And it's actually, that's another thing that I worked deeply on. And that was from deep study of working with women's bodies and understanding energetics, only because I had to build it, because there wasn't any book or any resource or any training that I could take. So it took me thousands of hours taking notes after each person on the ovaries, on the womb, on the birth energy repair. And it was really built from the ground up. And so sometimes those words are thrown around, and what took me thousands of hours, people are standing on my shoulders for that. So
That's
thank you
yeah,
for that.
that's a whole deep conversation
Mhm.
because I coined the term spirit baby medium and everybody uses it now. And I joke about that. Like I'm the original and you're just making my heart light up because I feel like in the spirit baby world, I've created the ground up with
Yeah.
and I love how you said that because maybe you're like inspiring me that like I did put thousands of hours into to create something. But I also feel like people know the authentic energy because when I looked at your programs, they're magnificent. They're fabulous.
Oh,
Like the depth and detail of energy you go through, I'm like, that's incredible.
yes.
And to get that deeper wisdom. And I love that you're getting both sides of the energies too. You're getting people that are maybe they're pushing on mainstream, but that you're giving this whole other peace and wisdom married in a way that they can ground,
Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
know?
So again, that honoring of source, but then also the language and understanding our bodies in a different way. Understanding our bodies are poetry. They respond to poetry. That's our first language, music and harmony and harmonic vibration. And so that's really the language of the pelvic bowl, which is something I had to kind of build my way back to. And I hope my books and my trainings and my teachings help women find their way back to that. And then in terms of illness and whatnot, I do think women tend to suffer more, although men tend to die earlier. So we're kind of both suffering in our own ways.
Interesting.
Women, I
Yeah.
think, take on a lot of energy. And one of the things
Mhm.
I do a lot with women is help them sort out where they're internalizing more than they can really healthfully do. So many women running businesses and whatnot, they run that all through their own energy system. So I teach them how to have energetic boundaries and kind of have, multiple things going, and not because we just unconsciously, because we're the ones that give life, we internalize. And so there are ways that we need more support and boundaries. I think it's challenging because we're in a fractured world. Most of us are in patriarchal, toxic patriarchal systems. So we're being overused and misused and taught to give away our energy and not understand our own needs for receiving, and also that we are sources. So there's, the broader compassion for how we are operating in a dysfunctional structure. So, there's needs to be more awareness for that. But it does lead to, I think, chronic disease without that. And I'm here to kind of put a foothold in that. And I work with younger mothers and try to help them, pull some of their own chi back and understand those boundaries. And I work with people, women all across the lifespan, just to kind of honor themselves. And the book, I did want to say this, the mothering book, the Mothering from Your Center, which has now been updated to Wild Mothering, and that was the original title. It just has more elder mother wisdom in it. That is a love letter to mothers, and Wild Feminine is really a love letter to the female body. So, they're not a call to do more or give more, but they're really a loving acknowledgement of how amazing we are. Then to the men, will say that I have three sons, so I have a lot of compassion for the men. I wrote Wild Creative also for men. And what I would notice is it's not that they don't internalize as much, because that's not really their wiring, but they kind of dissociate from themselves. And there's many ways that that happens. Their masculinity isn't really brought forward and welcomed in healthy ways. Their feminine is often shut down. And I think a lot of men are suffering, and there's a higher rate of suicide, a higher rate of depression, and also early death. So, we have to take care of the whole community more.
You're making me think now. Like I think about like you're working with so much energy of the pelvic bowl, of the feminine, the masculine. I know I have my own story, but how do you feel that reflected in your own body?
Mm.
Being in the sacral, being in the womb centers of so many, so many.
Right, right. Yeah, I think, everything I've learned, I've kind of learned brick by brick. There hasn't really been a teacher. I will say I did study with a woman named Sheila Murphy, who's had a lot of chronic health issues. So you wouldn't know her work. She did birth trauma work on babies. And I worked with her with my oldest child when he was a baby, and learned a whole body work training program with her. That I found sometimes too much, kind of like what you were just saying. And she had never had a child, and not that you need to have that to have the compassion, but there was a level of kind of disconnect from the crying. And I'm not saying either the baby shouldn't cry or whatnot, but what I found in that, so I used to actually work on babies a lot as well. But
Mhm.
I decided I really liked working on the mothers. And when you work on the mothers, the energetic shifts, and the babies aren't
That's
attached to anything,
true.
so they kind of move it. So that was actually my way in. But I would say just everything that I've done, I've had to kind of just build, other than I just want to acknowledge her because she was such a foundational person who she really worked in the nonverbal realm, and she gave me permission to work in the nonverbal realm. She worked with babies and animals. So, of course, and there's all this information that we may learn to tune out. So that was really lovely. But as far as like working in this powerful place, I think I was kind of naive, like most young people, do. But I remember there were a couple of key moments in my life where I learned things. Like I have worked on a lot of trauma, as you can imagine, and just
Yes.
really horrible things. Like as, various things are coming out, like I've heard stories you can imagine. And I remember when I had young children, I was worried, like, am I going to bring something home? Because they're like right in my
Yeah.
field. And right around that time, I can't remember the author's name, but it was this book called Entities Walk Amongst Us. And I'm
Mm.
forgetting his name. Actually, it's funny because I did a course of his too and took it. He was also a wounded man. He started dating one of the women in the class. So I said, I have to say, it's like all these things are sometimes you still have to kind of have your eyes open. But the grain of truth that I got from his teaching that was helpful was don't let fear be the door where you open to entities, because entities are all over. And I think at one time earlier, I was like, oh, there's good and bad, there's this and that. And certainly there are evil energies in the world. But really, if we think at it from a broader view, everything wants to be loved and healed. And it's just whether or not it's your job to do that healing. You can say no, it's not your job to heal someone's dark energy.
It's true.
But it's less fearful when you start to understand it like that. You really start to see the wounding, and it's just a different viewpoint. So for me, that was really key because I was bringing fear in about my children, and then I'm kind of more vulnerable. So that was one of the pivot points. Another pivot point was when I got on stage and did a TED Talk and really stood up for the female body and women, and that was a whole shamanic process. But when I did that, I felt more kind of like psychic attacks and things happening. And so I started studying more about protection, started using prayer, connection to the field. There's a lot on my website around this. I have a class called Energetics of Prayer, and I also have a level 3 that I developed that is kind of for anybody that works in the deeper realms that
Mm.
talks about spirit portals and protection. And every class I've taught on the practitioner level has taken about 8 to 10 years to develop. So that took about 8 years to develop. Practices, personal practices, some of them from shamanic study, and some of them just from being able to sense and get information from the field about how to clear my field and how to walk. Now, it doesn't mean that life isn't painful at times or disappointing or frustrating because I live in a family and I deal with humans and we are in a fractured time. But I have the tools that really help me come back to neutral, create harmonics, work with resonance, work with practices. But I am diligent in my practice. This is kind of a long answer to your question because I think it's important. I'm
Yeah.
diligent in my practice, so my field is clean and clear. And when people come, they feel that and they sense into that, and whether I'm teaching or I'm doing a healing session or hopefully mothering too.
Yeah, I think that's excellent that you shared that because we hear this a lot, right? This is what people get scared of, or what
Yes.
does that mean? And I've noticed with my own practice over the years, I almost go into another state and like another space comes through because my reflection over the years, I was like, wow, I'm working with a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And then I said, but I'm okay.
Right.
That's the thing. I'm like, that's interesting. And
Right.
then I tell myself, like, I've like you, I've like heard of traumas I didn't even know existed. Like, I'm
Right.
like, that's a real thing. In my
Yeah.
head, I'm like, whoa. And then somehow I do feel like those that are tuning in that are practitioners, it does take practice.
Mhm.
And it really where our frequency is as we're so evolving all the time.
Right.
There was
Mhm.
a time where I can feel like I was battled by these energies.
Mhm.
And then there was a time, especially honestly, when I was a fresh mother, I think there was too much
So
openness
open.
for
Yes.
me that it was
Yeah.
like, oh, and now I'm coming into really a new part of myself right now. And so because my kids are now, he just turned 15 and 9.
Yes.
9 still really needs me a lot, to be honest. But
Mhm.
I'm not nursing and changing diapers. How about that?
Right. Yes. It's a
That,
different,
that,
yes,
yeah,
you're not
that.
as
So,
permeable.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now
Mhm.
I feel like what my work as the messenger, and I really love that non-verbal, pre-verbal space. And I
Yes.
think because I understand the language so well,
Yes.
I call it
Absolutely.
like telepathy, really. I'm like
Yeah.
in that. But and yeah, so what you're saying, yeah, there's like I'm so glad you made a class about it because I feel like that's such a big area. Like in my Spirit Baby Academy, there is a section on like where do we keep our energy because that's where I think practitioners lose it, where they're like, I can't do this, I feel too much, and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Right.
you just and I want to say too, I don't know for you, like, but the practices keep changing too. It's not like one
Absolutely.
thing,
Yeah, and you
right?
learn.
Yeah.
I think, I've never stopped learning, and I continue
Yes.
to learn with women when they come in and see me, and I learn in my own life. My children are continuing to teach me a lot, especially as they go out into the world now and bump into things and deal with being empaths in a in a world that is, harsh right now. And so I think it's just, but knowing that it's the practice, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't feel perfect. It's more about the practice and continuing to work with the practice. And I think truly it's true that love is the most powerful vibration.
Mm.
It's far more powerful than fear. So when you can come into that vibration and come out of reactivity, that is, of course, an act of compassion for oneself. So it's not judgment. It's not like, oh, I'm bad at this or I'm doing this wrong. It's more like I'm going to hold myself in a place that feels good for me. And I think,
Mm.
too, the other thing that I stepped up quite a bit from 2018 and on, that's when I did that TED Talk. And then we went through the pandemic and all of that
Ah.
was practices with the land where I really connect with the land every place I either live or I'm traveling. So I say hello to the land, I relate to the land, and I'm kind of introducing myself and usually doing an offering of some sort and just kind of giving, that those little kinds of practices are really life changing for real,
Mm.
real.
I get it since we were talking earlier. I live in a new land.
Yeah.
And like, how is this land holding me? And I realized I live in a lot of lava.
Yeah.
And I've already been to some caves. By the way, like right by my house,
Yeah.
they closed the grounds at the Business Land Management. Am I saying that right? BLM.
BLM.
And one of the caves, it's really cool. It has stairs you go down, and so they closed this off for like a year and after doing these burns. But like that
Mhm.
cave, I'm like, it's like right down the street from me. I'm like,
Wow.
see you guys later. I'm gonna go to the
Yeah.
cave, which
Yeah.
that's a whole other podcast because going into the cave and the multidimensional energies
Yeah.
in the cave is a whole
Yeah.
other thing for me here.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
love that you shared about the land, and I don't think we do that, to be honest.
No.
We
Well,
don't
and
do that.
I think too, we're all children of the earth and we've just lost our connection at whatever point we lost it. And so I think when I started doing that, I felt awkward because I didn't have like traditional practices I'd been taught. And then as I started doing it, just with some simple prayers and relational, offering of water or song, or I use tobacco, or you can use salt or cornmeal, or it doesn't really matter. And I'm in urban Portland, and I started just kind of doing this little practice right on my urban land. The land felt really dead at first, and
Ah,
now it's like very alive. So every time I go out there, in fact, it's kind of like greeting an old friend. It's like, oh, you're back, come back. And the birds and the wind and it's an activation that happens. And it's just through the practice again. And it's our birthright to be relational. And I think the earth is so hungry for that that I notice whenever I touch in, it's like it's just so happy. It's like kind of an elder, right? Like a grandparent that's just so
yes.
happy you came to visit. And I think we
Hmm.
could think that more. And again, I have a very simple workshop on my website called The Energetics of Prayer because I felt like so many people were awkward with prayer or wounded from prayer because
Yeah.
it got co-opted by religion. And it's really a language of communication with the mystery. And the
Hmm.
simpler you make it, the easier. And there is no right, wrong. It's just about showing up like anything else, having a practice. It's showing up, and you can show up and feel frustrated. It's okay. You can actually even say, like, I'm having a hard time. You don't have to just be Zen every time you show up to do these practices. It's a dialogue, but it really, it really works well. And what's interesting is because I teach all over the world, I'm often in places where there's been like natural disasters, and just it feels like
Hmm.
spirit kind of puts me there. Like I was in LA during the fires, and I've worked with a lot of
Wow.
people from the fires, and so that is part of my role. But there's like a repair through the humans and the land, and then also the land often asks for support.
I do feel like a whole other conversation too, how massively effective our energy fields are to the earth in a
Yes.
way where people
Yeah.
don't even fully get it. Like we can change the atmosphere, we can do a lot
Right.
of things.
Right.
And I always like to sit in reflection with those and even just, I would even say observation, because
Mhm.
I think about where I live now and there's something interesting when you drive into spaces. And I think this is the season of where I need to be because I came from Topanga, which is very LA, which is a big city. The
Yes.
energy is very different. And I did go through a flood. It was on the news, by the way, broke our
Mhm.
roof before we
Mhm.
left. We were always in fire alert. And then
Mhm.
I wasn't there for the big fires because I don't think I was supposed to be
Mhm.
honest.
Yeah.
In that time of deep grief where
Yeah.
I know two people that lost homes
Yeah.
and I had friends in there and they said the grief was palpable, was everywhere. And
Yes.
that's where they had to be, but they were coming together, right? I
Yeah.
know here, like and maybe we'll talk more about fertilities. I feel like when we are connected to nature, I look outside, I see the tree. It
Mhm.
is an elder. It has a certain wisdom. And I know when I open my field up, I can hear that
Yes.
particular energy form. And I
Yeah.
do feel like what I teach too with conception energy is a nature kind of spirit
Mhm.
baby kind of connection is like what's your nature activities? Where are you going for a walk? Are
Yes.
you going in the water? What are you doing? Because I do feel like we've become more and more disconnected.
For
And when
sure.
I go out, like if I drive from here in between, there's no EMFs, there's no
Mhm.
towers, there's no
Yes.
cell phones. So
Yes.
something I've shared, I think I've shared this publicly. This was years ago. I was driving with my family, and then I'm like, what was that? I heard something out there that wasn't connected to anything. And then I went, oh, and then it's made me realize how many different non-humans energies there actually are everywhere. And it's not scary to say that. It's just
Yeah.
my observation. And maybe it's even the
Yeah.
wisdom of nature is so
Right.
rich. And so now what does Kelly do? She goes up to the higher mountains and opens her field and like, what am I feeling? I can find metals in the earth. I can find buildings if they're there. And I was like, this is kind of neat. I'm like, because for me,
Yes.
I was always told when I was younger, be a part of this world. Don't rely on your senses.
Right, right,
And it was
right.
hard, and I got sick a lot. I was the sick kid. So
Yeah.
then now I'm like, oh my gosh, I can feel. I don't need to be a good writer, a reader, or know numbers and letters. I can feel my way into this reality. And I
Yes.
want to say that because I think there was a time where we weren't allowed to do that.
Right.
But now we are. And so
Yeah.
nature, fertility, I get a lot of women, especially some men too. I do both. They have infertility. And I'm
Yes.
wondering, I know it's like a big conversation, like, and
Hmm.
then miscarriage. I actually do a lot. That's like
Hmm.
my area of specialty
Yeah.
is miscarriage. So
Mhm.
you probably see a lot. What can you say about
Yes.
these two pieces?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is what I've noticed from our female bodies is we register what's happening, right? We're like the radars and we're like the canaries and we range probably there's, different levels of sensitivity, but the female body is like the canary. It kind of detects when things are off. And I've just noticed in my practice more infertility, more babies with tongue tie. Just, and I think it's ecological. I think, there's many reasons, but I think the EMFs matter and I think the cell radiation matters. And I think we're just being inundated by endocrine disruptors and these things are impacting us and also the life, the hustle, the stress. So, I think what becomes a personal journey, like for infertility or even cancer, for example, becomes a sort of personal journey, but it's really a collective thing that's happening. So it's kind of like you have to hold both. One is you're working on your individual, whatever it is, to support your fertility, and the other is you have to have a lot of compassion for the fact that our bodies are under immense stress. And so it's a challenge and I support a lot of women with that and that's how I try to hold them as lovingly and I give them practices to kind of create cellular relaxation, connection because when you're going through fertility you become more and more disconnected and more in your head like how am I going to make this happen? So I always hold them with a lot of love and compassion and energetic practices to support their fertility while also just kind of honoring the fact that our bodies are a reflection of the ecological stress. And so there's that. And I think miscarriage, the same thing. So it's a challenging time. It's a challenging time to try to be embodied because you're having to work a lot harder for that. And I'm sure we were meant for this time, but it doesn't mean it doesn't cause a lot of heartache.
Yeah, you really bring up a lot of good things because somebody was laughing at me the other day when I said, I have this phone, right? And I shut it off when I carry it in my little bag. That's
Yeah.
touching my womb, by the way.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
someone's like, I never thought of that. And I was like, it's a little microwave. I'm no
Yeah,
scientist, but I don't
yeah,
want to put a little microwave on my body. So I
yeah.
never, unless I have to go out somewhere, I actually always
Mhm.
shut it off. And then everybody
Yeah,
gets mad at me. I'm trying to
yeah,
call you, Kelly. And I was like, well,
yes,
there was a time where there were no cell phones. You're going to have to
yes,
wait and be patient.
right.
And, I feel like that is a big part of the
Mhm.
disruption too. But like you said, I mean, I know stress is a factor, and it's something you said because I get a lot of those that are tuning in too are feeling like going year after year questioning. And you
Mhm.
said something just even around disembodiment.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because what I've seen, I've had women come with multiple IVF fails
yeah.
and
Mhm.
or multiple miscarriages, like even
Mhm.
beyond 10, by the way.
Wow.
And I'm going, okay, I'm no miracle worker with this energy as we're just meeting, because I
Right,
feel like people aren't going to open up right away, right to their
right,
field, to you. And
right.
I have a curiosity of this journey with this little being. Like, what is this? This
Mhm.
body's coming, it's
Right,
going, it's coming. And I know
right.
I don't I don't prescribe like I have all the answers. Absolutely not. I know that I tell a lot of people there's mystery in this too.
Yes, there
There's
is.
an
Always.
unwinding in life. Like you may not know.
Yes,
It's kind of like
yes.
death.
Hmm.
Like why did
Yeah,
my baby miscarry?
right,
Why did I have a stillborn?
right,
And I don't think people are asking me that anymore because I think energetically I'm like, okay, that's not the questions we're going into,
right,
which I
mhm,
understand that's the grief and pain question.
right,
I
right.
get that, but I'm also like, okay, let's just
Hmm.
get into the body. Like, let's
Yes,
listen. What's this baby's energy?
yes,
Because I do feel like the babies are in communication with their mothers and
absolutely.
fathers. And I know you know
Absolutely.
that too, because you do talk
Yes,
about it in the book.
yes,
What can you
absolutely.
say about
Yeah,
baby
yeah.
communication?
You mean when they're in utero or before?
What is your experience?
Yeah, I would say. that it's a wonderful practice to actually communicate through the womb to the doorway to your child, or to your potential child. And I had that experience primarily with maybe with my second a little bit, especially with my third, just because I hadn't made a bridge yet back to my own womb. It was my first child was born, and then I kind of learned more about it and learned more about how sensitive babies were and whatnot. I always I don't do internal work once people are pregnant, and some PTs do, and it's because I feel like babies are very sensitive, and I think it's too much to be in their space. So I will do energy sessions, and always after the first trimester, because I like to again leave the nest alone. But when someone comes in for any kind of body work, and usually I'm being very gentle and kind of more energetic, I introduce myself to the baby and let them know who I am and that I'm there to do some work to support their mom's energy field. If there's anything they want to let us know, that they can bring that up, and otherwise they can just, rest. And I usually get a boom right away. And they're all like, oh, wow, they're talking to us. And I think it's just, they're
Oh,
so sensitive. I think I feel kind of protective of babies in the womb because we don't realize just they're so sensitive. And that doesn't mean, I think I also don't want mothers to feel like they can't move or can't sneeze or, there's a line in there of being aware and honoring that sensitivity, but also not feeling like they're fragile and maybe not operating out of fear, but love. So it's kind of like there's all that. I remember in the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology and that kind of baby psychology work that I found fascinating. The only thing I felt was I felt like there weren't enough mothers' voices in there. A lot of times they were specialists or even men. And, as a lived experience with three children, I wanted more voice for the mother and compassion for the mother and also awareness of yes, we want to guard the space, but sometimes intervention happens with birth and mothers can feel like a failure or like they've ruined something. Or it's kind of, I have a bigger respect for the picture of life and kind of how the medicine field can help us through all the journeys because sometimes there's some lesson or something that is coming through that we may not fully understand that we don't have necessarily control over. Just like you can't protect your children from all the pain they're going to experience in
yeah.
the world, but you can be present with them. And you're more likely to be able to be present if you don't feel this separation of guilt. So
Mm.
I guess I'm saying
That's,
lots of things at
yeah,
once.
no, that's so
Yeah.
valuable because
Mhm.
yeah, it's like mother's guilt, mothers feel bad. There's so much energy in that. And then that becomes an obstacle that becomes this
Yes.
thing now, this thing.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and I know when I've worked with women, I'm like, okay, like I could be a little comical, a little like pushy. I'm like, okay, that's all right. Now we move out of that. Now what? Like, because it's like, oh wait, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
Kelly just gave me permission to like
Yes.
to
Yes.
see another angle of it, and
Yeah.
what does that even mean? But what you're saying too, it makes me laugh because years and years ago in my little Topanga tree house, I would see people in person, and I had
Yeah.
this woman come in. She had twins. And one day I did hands-on work with her. This is when I did table work. People don't know that I used to do that a long time ago. It's where how I got into knowing and energy and seeing and feeling. That's what I realized. And on the table, I'll never forget it because, and her kids probably like, oh my gosh, they're probably like preteen now. Um, they kicked back my energy when I went into their space. And I instantly felt
Yeah.
nausea, and so did the
Yeah.
mom. And then
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, oh, and then in that moment, I had this internal conversation of like, oh my gosh, you just went in there, Kelly, and
Yeah.
like just thought,
Yeah.
hey, here's
Yeah.
energy. And then I was like,
Totally.
they did not like that. And
Right.
and then I had to sit with that. And so now, over the years, I say, well, if you're in pregnancy, I'm not entering that field because I have to respect baby's energy and what they
Yeah.
want. But
Yeah.
again, it doesn't minimize the parent doing that. That's their own
Right.
business and that
Right.
connection. But I know I'm an outsider too. Like,
Yes.
who am
Totally.
I? Like,
Yes. Well,
people
and
are like, no,
that's the
no,
thing
come
I
here
think.
and do this. And it's like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, you have another being there. They may not want that
They
or
may
need
not want
it.
that. And I think giving them that choice, which usually we don't, right? We override. And so
Yes.
it's, yeah, I'm very respectful of that space and just kind of also aware of how sensitive they are. So the other thing I do is if I am going to do an energy session with a mom, I pull my energy way in so
Mm,
that when I'm approaching, I'm not penetrating. And, I think that's so unconscious when, especially
yes.
how we're trained to do body, we're very kind of tend to be pointed and masculine in our energy. So this is
Mm.
more of a feminine approach where I'm kind of like, you know, coming in softly. Those sorts of things I think are important, but not always highlighted.
Yeah. Again, it's like, yeah, the baby being is what I call them. What
Yes.
is their conversation, their connection? And so you talk about You work with women in conception, pregnancy, and birth loss, you'd say?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like it's under minimized, like pelvic hair. I'm going to go a little bit back to the pelvic health care.
Yes.
Like, let's say
Oh my
you're,
gosh. Yes.
I wish I would have had that. And my
Yes.
story, I'll tell you sometime. It's a long, terrible story. And but
Mm-hmm.
I knew it intuitively, something's up, but I had nobody to say, you should see a pelvic floor person. And then, or like there was no energy around it like 15 years ago enough. And then it
Right.
made me reflect, over the years, because I was like, wow, I really needed that person. But here's the thing too, I was terrified
Mm. Right.
because there I had physical actual trauma
Mm.
through
Yes.
through a sports accident, and I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
realize how much that affected
Yeah.
me, and I actually
Yeah.
suspected it would affect my first birth, and it
Yeah.
did. And I often, my ongoing joke is my firstborn broke my second chakra right open,
Mm. Yeah.
physically, emotionally,
Yeah.
and spiritually.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was a dark time for me,
Mm.
really dark. And then
Mm.
I kind of knew, even with the midwifery care, I was like, I'm kind of nervous about this old. And they were like, it's
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And then I realized later on, I worked with Ellen Heed. Do you know her?
Mm. Yes. I've heard of her work. I
So
don't know
yeah,
it
yeah. So I
specifically.
worked with her in the West LA. It was the first, and she did internal, all this stuff. It was the first time my whole life that my body completely surrendered to the normal energy of a vagina and vulva and all that. Like before, it was like just there. Because I
Yes.
think of that
Totally.
trauma. I had a lot of medical trauma too there
Yeah. Yeah.
because the not 7-year-old Kelly wasn't talked through this issue
Right.
and this incident through the
Right.
sledding accident that literally
Yeah.
tore my perineum. No one talked to her about it.
Yeah.
All those layers, and then with my
Yes.
mom's awkwardness with it, it just
Yes.
it created this thing.
I know.
And so when Ellen did that, it was like
Mhm.
life changing in that moment. But to take the courage, and this is what I wonder about women, to take the courage to even go
Right.
is
Right.
like
Right.
because of the
I know.
somatic, the heart,
I
the
know.
sweating. Like,
Yes.
how do you even work
Yes.
with that? Like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think from the beginning, I mean, first of all, a lot of times people are referred by a friend. So there's a lot of word of mouth. That's really, I don't advertise. It's like women come word of mouth. And then I have a presence, through my books, through the internet, that people can kind of feel and see like how I talk about the body, what I'm holding. And I think they get a feel for me. When they come in, though, I'm always aware. I always say, have you had pelvic massage before? And I would say probably 90% is no. So I'm
Yeah.
usually the first person. So it's kind of the way I normalize it and talk about it and teach them. And the first thing I say is this should really be routine care. So a lot of what I say is kind of
Mm,
nurturing and warm and helping them understand it hasn't been normalized for them because the model of care is broken. It's not them, it's like the model of care is not holding women's bodies well. And then I get out a pelvic model and I show them the muscles and I talk about the fascia and I talk about how women hold things, even just physically, and how we need this flow in our root that the pelvic
mm.
floor holds. So I'm not talking about Kegels and strengthening and things like that. I say mostly women are congested and disconnected, and that impacts our health and our vitality and our sense of how we feel in our bodies. And so this massage can really help that. And I talk to them about, this is your choice. So if there's anything you don't like that I'm doing, you just let me know. So I'm also using a
Mm,
lot of, I know people have
yes.
been trained by the patriarchy to just sit back and accept. And I'm watching them and I'm working with their breath and their connection because my work is not separate and just doing something to the body. I'm very connected to them being connected to their body. So I'm reading the
Yeah.
energy, watching it, and I usually am guiding them through a meditation. So the body work that I developed, holistic pelvic care, was basically filling a lot of the holes for me that would work more relationally. So with a women's health PT perspective, but relationally, fascially, energetically, working with the medicine of the body. So it's a very holistic and very nurturing experience. So people come out. I have an assistant named Haley, and she always laughs with me because people walk in the door one way, they walk out the door the other way. She's always like,
Yeah,
they're
they're all like
so
walking all like
different.
it's all
Yeah,
yeah,
everybody's
that's
all like
amazing.
bright, and it just
Yeah.
feels so good. And I think so, all of those things. So people do come in, I think, nervous, but also once they've
Hopeful.
experienced it and even the whole process, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this isn't routine care.
See, that's the thing that nowadays I see a lot more of these kind of
Yes.
bridging the energetic, not just that, like I shared that story about that nice
Yeah.
woman who was like forcing, and this is still my judgment in my mind because I sprained my ankle and my husband's like, you should go to PT. I'm like, nope. Because because he went and he's like he wants them to pull and pull, and I said to him,
Yeah,
stop
yeah,
telling me this. I said my
yeah,
body's
yeah,
intelligent, I'm going to heal it.
absolutely.
I says when you tell me that, I told him, I said
Yeah,
it makes me feel traumatized, like I don't
right,
feel good in my
right,
body, and I
right.
want to be respected for that because of what I went
Yeah,
through all my life. And then
absolutely.
I got to a point in my teenage years when I started refusing medical intervention, and I knew that I
Yeah,
had consent and a voice because I
yeah,
was like sick a lot and they were throwing me. I was an experiment, I know that.
wow,
And
absolutely.
that can take decades or honestly my whole life to like feel what is this about? And so I've become honestly my own doctor in many ways.
I think that
And if I need
eventually,
people,
yeah.
I'll call upon them, but I don't like have a Rolodex of like, oh, I need, especially now I'm in a new place. I'm
Mhm.
like, what do I need? And but with pelvic health, I feel like so many women have so many issues and things, and yeah, they're not running out going, okay, let's do this. But I think about, and maybe your book has this. I want to make sure those that are tuning in, the mothering, wild mothering, would you say someone could look at that in conception? And even birth loss and find like maybe exercises or things they can do to prepare their pelvic health.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of information. Again, it's a love letter for mothers and women. And I felt when I had my own miscarriage, I felt kind of like there was no care. So there's an energetic meditation for miscarriage or birth loss, and I tell stories. And also there's basically a drawing for the newest version. I hired an artist, a mother who was able to draw the energetics of how I see when I work with people through birth loss and miscarriage to kind of complete the process because it often doesn't get fully
Yeah.
complete. So there's an energetic process. So there's a diagram and an energy that is meditation that is walked through. And then also with birth energetics and birth trauma and how to repair that, and then how to work with the birth field through your child's life, because that birth field that we're given is really meant to be medicine for us as mothers to work with that child. It's their download. And you can have any kind of birth and get repair the connection to that because the birth field is our birthright with the child. So
Mm.
I think of
Mhm.
it as like the blueprint, the download of energetics for their life, for their medicine, and also for you as a mother. So I used it when my kids were sick. I used it, did it on their birthdays just to celebrate,
Wow.
just did it for my
Yeah.
oldest, like download the energy as a meditation. When they were younger, I used to do it when they were in arms. Now they live away from me, so I'm kind of doing it more distance, but it's so helpful for any kind of illness, accident, just celebrating them, growth step when they're going through a change and you're not quite sure what they need. There's just so many ways that energetics can be helpful. So I guide women through that, and there's drawings, and so lots of good energy medicine that can kind of help you work with the field that you are innately given when you have a child.
That's so amazing. I love that. And I want to share, we're coming close to the end. I feel like we can talk for hours. This is like there's so many things that it's popping in my head. I'm like, oh, what is her connection to this? And we know I feel like everybody needs some pelvic floor love. Like we know that. And but how are ways that others can find your books, find who you are, and just learn and get all this delicious energy that you share?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a website, wildfeminine.com, and on that I list my trainings. I teach around the world. If anyone's drawn to become a practitioner, it's really wonderful. Every woman needs this, so we need more practitioners. So there's information about learning holistic pelvic care, where to study it, how to do it. There's also that course I mentioned that was for if you work in the in-between realms, also like any doulas, that level 3 spirit portals and protection is helpful. There's other just classes that you can access. I'm trying to create a mini library basically on
Oh,
wild
nice.
feminine from
Yeah.
all, just so we can learn personally, and also it's our birthright as women to have this kind of medicine. You can order books. Also, just go to your favorite bookstore. We need to support those bookstores, so go there and just request the book. That's a great way to do it. And I would love to connect. I also do energy sessions distance too. I love doing those. So if people are having anything that they want to work on birth trauma, or even just, I work a lot on mother line lineage. You and I were talking about lineage. I have that birth energetic, or the lineage class that I taught with my son. I taught 2 classes with my eldest son, a lineage class,
Wow.
changing the ties that bind us, and raising sons well. And neither of those mean perfect. It means like we're doing the work, we're in there, and we have real skills that we've learned from, the challenges that we're encountering. So hopefully that's all places that can help you lovingly make more medicine and know that you're already a beautiful human and you deserve to be cared for and cherished.
I was gonna say any final words, but that was beautiful. We'll leave you with that poetry. Thank you so much, Tammy, for being here.
Thank you, Kelly.
And I want to thank you all for joining episode 239, The Wild Mothering, Accessing Yourself as a Ritual for Your Highest Feminine Creativity. Thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio with your host, me, Kelly Meehan. Please join my community and stay in touch with monthly energy rants, Spirit Baby poetry, and get access to Spirit Baby 101 with tips and practices at my newsletter at newearthchildren.com. And join me on Instagram with lives at Spirit Baby Medium, and join the Mighty Networks, the Spirit Baby Collective membership, and Motherhood to Mediumship. Remember, you are the heart that holds communication, and it is your time to connect. Come share in the great shift of your mind and the true spirit of your heart with Spirit Baby Communication.